We are excited to be launching our next podcast series, which is interviewing Golden Hoodie winners from around the world who've got amazing trailblazer stories. A Golden Hoodie winner is somebody that Salesforce has recognised as being a true trailblazer, somebody who gives back but also is an expert in their domain. And we can't wait to share these stories with you. Tune in, listen, and be inspired at these amazing stories and give them kudos on social media for everything they've done. And what I would recommend is definitely tune in and follow in their footsteps. Enjoy, and we look forward to getting your feedback.
If your leadership team is pushing you to deploy Agentforce yesterday, you already know the real challenge isn't the AI itself, it's the environment you're building it on. To orchestrate autonomous workflows, you need to feed your agents deep, flawless context about your metadata and business processes. That's why Hubble created the intelligence layer. We give you total operational clarity, telling you exactly how to clean up and structure your org so your AI actually works. Stop guessing. Build Agentforce with absolute confidence at hubble.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Mums on Cloud9 podcast. We're delighted to have you here today and to be continuing to interview these amazing Golden Hoodie winners around the globe. Their stories are quite often unknown, and we wanted to really bring out the highlights of what they've been doing now, where they are in their career to really inspire you and help forge your own career forward. So today, I'm delighted to have Keir Bowden here with us today. He's a force amongst the community. Some of you might know him already. And he was given a Golden Hoodie at Dreamforce 2024. One for his contribution to the community in many ways, which I'll let him share in a moment, but also because he was one of the first to get his hands on Agentforce. And what I didn't know is that it was previously called Copilot. And so it was the first iteration of Agentforce right at the very beginning. He was part of that journey. So we're also going to touch on the whole story of AI, and certainly what Keir's doing in that roadmap today. So Keir, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us. So tell everybody a bit about yourself and your journey to getting your Golden Hoodie.
Sure. Thanks, Ada. Thanks for having me on. So I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for coming up on 18 years now. I was originally a Java developer, moved across to Salesforce because it was quite close to Java and I got on well with the technology. In terms of the contribution to the community, I started out on the old force.com discussion boards, which probably maybe predate your time. Basically, I was using them a lot to ask questions to get information about Visual Force as it was back in the day, doing a lot of UI work with that and getting a lot of help from the community. And I thought this is very good. I'm really enjoying this. And so after I've been working with it for about sort of 9 months to a year, starting to get on top of things myself, I started contributing back. I started answering questions, and then it kind of snowballed from there. I started to get a little bit of a reputation, got involved. I think the London Salesforce developers started in 2000. I quickly got involved in organizing that, speaking at that. I've been blogging for years. Blogging was one of the first things I did. I think that was about 2009. I put my first blog post out on jelly legs, expecting a flaming from everybody, but it was very warmly received, which was nice. Yeah, done a lot of speaking, written a book on Visual Force, partway through writing a book on testing at the moment. Yeah, and just contributed in various different ways, really. I'd say I do less now in terms of the answering questions type of things when people are stuck. And I tend to put together kind of more complete solutions almost and publish those out and talk about those because I find there's like plenty of people doing the answering of the questions now. So we don't need to get competitive about it.
Yeah, and it's a brilliant collation of all of that content, isn't it, really? And I think similar to you, I've written all these blogs and content, and the reason I've put it together in a book is to consolidate it and give people like the full answer, because a lot of the questions and the content you've got just gets lost, doesn't it? So it's brilliant you've
Absolutely.
put all that together. So can people find those books on Amazon?
One of them is about the Visual Force Development Cookbook is on Amazon. I mean, there's probably not many people doing Visual Force now, but those that are, it hasn't really changed that much, so it might still be useful. The testing one is actually using a platform called LeanPub, where you publish before you've finished it. So you publish at a lower price and people take a chance that you're going to finish it. So I've done like 3 iterations now, I'm about 70% through. So the price is gradually creeping up. So this is a good opportunity for people to get in on the ground floor. And it means they get all the updates, etc. New editions are all included if they buy it through that route. It will go on Amazon eventually, but that needs to be complete and have a bit more artwork around it than I'm currently at.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I think from our side, I mean, you clearly said that you moved into enterprise development at an early stage. I mean, what does your day to day look like now?
Well, my day-to-day's changed quite a bit since those days because I've gone self-employed. My company BrightGen got taken over by a large American organization, and I worked for about 3.5 years there. But I just found I preferred being part of a smaller, faster-moving team. So I've kind of spun out on my own, and most of my focus now is probably more on content creation, sometimes paid, sometimes for community conferences and things like that. Still writing the book on testing. I did test dreaming a couple of weeks ago, which was an all-afternoon online event on testing. And at the moment I'm enjoying the freedom of being able to do those things as they come up. Because previously I could literally do World Tour, Dreamforce, and London's Calling, and that was it. I didn't have any more time to spare on those things. So since going self-employed, I've done French Touch. I'll be doing Czech Dreaming this year, as well as London's Calling and whatever else appeals to me later in the year. Yeah, so day to day is still writing a lot of code, still doing a lot of development, but for things that interest me, and generally speaking, to put those out in blog posts rather than as part of any paid work for a customer.
Yeah, no, I mean, you and I had a conversation prior to the podcast, didn't we? And we spoke about how important it is to get yourself out there and, and attend these events. It's all
Absolutely.
great to meet new people and everything. And I suppose, something that I just took from what you just said, how do you think things are changing? Do you think the bar's rising, or do you think it's lowering based on your experience?
I think it's a really, really interesting time. I'm really pleased I'm in the industry while all of this is happening, but also it's kind of a double-edged sword. I probably wouldn't like to be starting out in the industry at this moment in time because I think there's so much uncertainty. There's an awful lot of hype about what AI is going to do and all the roles it's going to replace, and yet all those organizations saying it's going to replace those roles appear to be still hiring for those roles, which is very confusing. They can't replace it with AI, then who can? But I think one of the difficulties, and I keep saying this to people, one of the difficulties at the moment with knowing where to go in terms of the AI technology and what that's going to mean, is there is so much money flooding into it compared to previous kind of bubbles, hype cycles, etc., or what maybe realities that this might be. There's so much money flowing in that even something that's wrong is going to be able to keep going for a considerable amount of time because there's so much venture capital money. They're not going to run out very quickly. So I think picking the winners and losers is going to be really difficult because they're all going to look the same for probably, potentially a year, 18 months. So I think that's making it difficult. I think what it probably is doing is giving organizations a little bit of pause for thought on their hiring, especially unfortunately, probably at the entry level where they're thinking, well, maybe AI is going to be able to handle this. It's not there at the moment, but maybe I'll just, slacken off my hiring in that space for 6 months and see where we go. Again, we've heard we're never going to need graduates again, and Salesforce have just announced they're hiring 1,000 graduates. So clearly things aren't as cut and dried as they may seem.
I think
I think, yes. Sorry.
you do need somebody to manage a system at the end of the day, though, don't you? And somebody to manage an agent to build it. Like, so I think they say entry level roles, but you need somebody that can manage the configuration on the system and sort of the security of the
Absolutely.
data and
And the
everything.
thing
So
that I keep saying is if we don't hire any juniors, where are the seniors going to come from once the current crop of seniors decide to retire? We're still going to need people to manage those agents, and we won't have anyone because no one's been being trained up on it. So I think anyone that's taken the view that we don't need to do any of this and AI will take care of it all is being very short-sighted, I must admit. And I think in any large organization, things like compliance and governance, you're never going to be able to hand it all over to an agent, or you're certainly going to fail audits if you start doing that kind of thing and you can't evidence that you've got any control over it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of hype and there's probably some reality in there as well, but it's just difficult to unpick it at the moment.
yeah, well, some of the insight I've had from consultancies is some of we say the seniors. I know we're all in the older brackets here, but some of them just don't like the change and don't want to embrace the new, and so they're hiring juniors because they're the ones that will learn the new tools of tomorrow. And I think there's that change management piece that there's always so much to learn in tech and AI, and it's people's interest and appetite to change the way they work if they don't want to use AI. I would say that's probably why some of the companies are hiring newbies, and newbies could be mature people, they could be juniors, but people that are brand new and don't know a different way of working, because changing old habits dies hard. It's like with any system, isn't it? So I know your mention of Salesforce hiring grads. It might be because actually the way that people were working before, just people weren't on that journey, ironically, at a Salesforce company. But having spoken to some leading SIs, that's what they're finding. So it's interesting how it's going to play out, I think. I mean, from our point of view, sort of seeing all there's so we haven't lost any customers in the Salesforce industry, and there's lots of systems that need managing, but the capacity of thousands of charities aren't going to jump into Agentforce and use AI, in lots of different ways. I think that we're going through a gradual shift of upskilling and developing, aren't we? Really, in terms of where it's heading.
Yeah, I think it's. I think you look at most of the kind of industrial type revolutions in the past. I mean, once plows came along, it stopped needing people to use horses and walk behind horses to plow a field, but it didn't reduce the output of agriculture. It's quite the reverse.
Yeah.
There were loads more jobs, and I can kind of. I must admit, I think if I was in a full time, back in the day when I used to do full time development, I was really liked writing code, and I think I probably wouldn't be overly happy if my job was no longer writing code, but looking at code that had been written by AI and pointing out any bugs that were in there, because that certainly wasn't why I got into computing in the first instance. So I can certainly see that some people would maybe not want to change and embrace the AI to that degree.
Yeah, I think developers have been the most at threat, right? That seems to be, obviously you can do clicks, but somebody still needs to manage that. But coders are, like you say, overseeing somebody else's code almost and checking that. It's a different ball game, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's the worst of all possible worlds, because you're just finding the bugs. You're just pointing out the problems. You're not getting any of the creativity, any of the enjoyment. It's the reverse of what AI was supposed to do. It's kind of taking all the creative work and leaving us with the
Yeah.
drudge work of figuring out what it got wrong.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, going back to the beginning, when you were at Bright, were you there when Dreamforce, I think 2012? Because I remember being with the BrightGen team at the airport, because they're like one of the few partners I knew at the time, and I was like, I'd had calls with you because I'd just embraced Salesforce for my nonprofit, and I'd had conversations. Were you there at that point?
I remember meeting you at Dreamforce, but that wasn't at the airport. I think the if that was the year we had all the chocolate, I don't know if you remember, where we took a suitcase of dairy milk for our stand because we found that Americans loved that. So
Maybe,
I'm
yeah.
sure we got loads of traffic. So yeah, so I was flying home a day earlier than the rest, but I remember in the kind of the final morning, that was when Dreamforce was 3.5 days.
Yeah,
Final morning, we had a meeting up on the top floor of the Moscone West while they were dismantling the event around us and started asking us to leave because it was
yeah.
getting to the point when they needed to shut the doors. But yeah, I was around then. I remember talking to you about some non-profit UI type stuff.
Yeah, so it all go back to the early days and what things look like. It's funny, isn't it? So it's
Mm.
still here, but we're keeping pace with everything. So obviously you launched with Copilot, and then that's now Agentforce. So are you still working with Agentforce? Do you
Yeah, I'm
work
still
with certain AI products that you really like that you'd recommend to other people?
yeah, I'm still doing a lot with Agentforce. I'm interested in things like how you can test Agentforce, the whole probabilistic testing of AI versus deterministic testing of old school code is quite a change, quite a juxtaposition. So I'm quite interested in the ramifications of that. And I'm also doing a bit on kind of almost inverting agent force, so calling agent force from Flow and Apex rather than the user having a natural language of having more of a fixed determinist process, but with some AI creativity in the middle, some AI maybe sentiment analysis, that kind of thing. Still do a fair bit with Agent Force in terms of creating they're still actions, but they're sub agents now rather than topics. So yeah, still play around with things like that. Enforce vibes, quite interesting. Had a few goes with that. Interestingly, seemed to struggle a bit with Salesforce metadata, which is the bit I was expecting it to be the strongest on. In terms of the other tools, I use Claude Code from time to time, but I don't at the moment. I'm not writing a huge amount of code, so I feel like that's a treat for me rather than handing that off to the AI. I would say the thing that I use AI for in the most at the moment, it's ChatGPT, but it shouldn't really matter, is more in terms of a reviewer of my content that I create. What I'll tend to do is write something and then hand that over to ChatGPT and say, what do you think I'm trying to say here? What points are you getting from what I've written? And that can be quite interesting because it can sometimes make it apparent that I haven't been as clear as I thought I was being, that I hadn't introduced something, but I just jumped straight in. And sometimes when I've finished, I'll ask it for some feedback as well. And some of that feedback will be really good. And there'll be things points where I thought, oh yeah, that should have put that in. I will add that. And other times it's absolutely terrible. But the standard is they'll always tell me it's a fantastic piece of writing, or it gives me a little,
Be a pat on the
I think
yeah,
you're so right. I mean, I know for me, I mean, obviously, I think I don't know how we lived before without ChatGPT. You'll hear me say that often, but it's almost like a sandwich, isn't it? You do your own stuff, you're prompting, and then you get the output, but then you've got to then do stuff on the end. So it's not a case of it's still that human element either side of it. I think, you almost want to make sure that it gets it right by putting in what you want it to say, but then, it's just about rewriting it. But again, it's editing it at the end. So I think it's always important to, rather than just go ahead and just do something that ChatGPT's given you. You have to check it first. So I think for you, that sounds like a really good way to do it. That you've started from the beginning and then done that. So in terms of, you've just said about Agent Force. What is your favourite? I mean, do you think that it's a really good thing that we're moving this way? Or, I mean, you clearly love it. So is it something that you absolutely love? You think it's great, or are there any bits, any downsides, if you like?
I describe it as one of those things where I kind of flip between it's great and it sucks. And I think
Oh, you might say that.
The Marmite effect.
Yeah.
it's really important to kind of think back a couple of years to before we had this. And when it first came out, when ChatGPT first came out, and we could just ask it to do things, draft email, that was like magic. We could just
Yeah.
give it some vague idea of what we wanted to produce a whole load of content. I mean, we've obviously gone mad with it and we're using it to produce AI slop, and there's reams and reams of this stuff coming out. So that's the kind of downside, is how it's being used, really. But it is, yeah, I think it's great. I think it's the next iteration of automation. We've had various types of automation that have been fairly rigid and fairly deterministic, and now we've got one that's a bit more creative. Where I think it's awesome is at things like customer service. It doesn't necessarily always get the answers right and doesn't necessarily always handle the process very well. But what it's fantastic at is being able to identify from some natural language, from either a written piece of text or a spoken piece of text, what that person is, what their issue is, and how they feel about it, the sentiment and the kind of providing clarity. And I think that, even if it just did that and nothing else, and then it got handed over to a human at that point in time, that's such a time saver to carry out that kind of thing. I think there's probably the slight issue with it is that everyone kind of got into the habit of, oh, we can just have agents. We don't need humans anymore doing any of this stuff. And it turns out it's not quite as straightforward as that. So you definitely got to have the humans there. Otherwise, the customer experience isn't going to be necessarily always fantastic. But I think of that kind of thing, and I think of that kind of thing, I always expected it to be good, because think about service versus sales. Service is very quantifiable. It's quite almost a hard science type of thing. There is a question. You would typically have some content that you can use to identify what the answer to the question, and send that back. It's not a purely creative, whereas I think sales is much more creative, relationships, etc. So I always felt like service was going to be good, and I always felt like marketing was going to be good from the point of view of creating content. It's just, unfortunately, there's a little bit of a Frankenstein's monster going on there, that we've unleashed this thing and it's creating terabytes of content and there's no getting away from it.
Yeah, I think having humans, as you just said, alongside agents is the dream, really, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, humans and agents working in harmony. And you've got to have humans involved, because otherwise, if something goes wrong and you're asked, how did this happen? And you go, I've no idea, that's not going to feel like things are going to go well for you, I think. And I certainly know a lot of the audits and the like that I used to have to do around information security, our coding practices, etc. If I said, yeah, we just throw AI and we just copy and paste whatever it gives us and that seems to go okay, probably wouldn't feel like I was managing the risk very well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's why, we talked about early stage roles before, but I think every org needs a Salesforce admin or BA, because unless somebody's still managing that process, I mean, every org has a backlog as long as they're on.
Absolutely.
It's just getting stuff done faster. I'm like, oh my God, if we can tell it what to build in an,
Absolutely.
we don't, what you're talking about, slop, the thing is, if you've got somebody saying, oh, build this for me, build that, you're basically giving, it's almost like giving end users like the task of building something and producing like absolute rubbish, and then the system's rubbish, and then it's never going to be used. Whereas you still need somebody who can do the architecture design, say what they want building, and then it will build it, or ideally build it for you, right? Which is where you then save the time and you can get stuff done quicker and get that backlog done quicker. So, for me, I think you're always going to need those people.
Mm.
I think things will get done quicker. So in terms of an implementation,
Yeah.
I was having a chat with one of the VPs at Salesforce the other day, and he said, "Oh, I'd love to, love to see how Salesforce consultants are using AI to speed up their implementation and reduce costs, but I haven't actually seen it in a tangible format right now." And that's interesting, isn't it? I think some
Yeah.
SIs are further along than others with this, but Salesforce aren't yet seeing it necessarily in terms of, reducing costs for their implementation. So if SIs aren't, I know some SIs are embracing it more than others. So there's probably a bit of a mix. But it's the same with customers. As say, we're kind of on a movement, but I think as long as admins are upskilling in using AI to build, they're going to keep up in pace with the market. That's where we're positioning. At Sims, it's very much around, people need to be upskilled in these. And if the old school don't embrace the change as well, they're going to be in trouble because it'll be the newbies that come in, which is what seems to be happening.
Absolutely, and I think I also think it's not just the building. I think it can be helpful when triaging why the classic admin question was like, I was expecting to see this record and I can't, and then you start plowing through all the sharing rules and permission sets, all those kind of things. Having something you could just say, here's the metadata, here's this user, why can't they see it, and for it to go and do that wading through with the rules and identify it. You've obviously got to check that it got it right and it hasn't just hallucinated it. But I think things like that can be really helpful. And I think also going back to the whole the building of the thing, yeah, you definitely need BAs, you definitely need admins, because users a lot of the time they know what they want to achieve, but they don't necessarily know all the detail around it. I just want a way to do this. Okay, well, what does that mean? Who should be able to do that? Should everybody be able to do that? Do we need to, what kind of controls do we need to have around this? And if you had a user prompting AI, you wouldn't get any of that. So you'd have no controls. You just have wide open systems, just solving specific big business problems. So you do need those other disciplines coming into it rather than just everybody being a builder, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The other initiative here I'd just like to talk about is, your passion as well as ours for helping new talent talk and share their experiences in the community. So, as you said, you started off answering questions and now you do speaker and you ran this speaker academy for quite a
Absolutely, yeah.
while.
Did a few years.
What would you say to people who are in those shoes of thinking, I've got things that I want to share, but I don't know how to make that start and to how to get a speaker slot? What was some of your key tips that you shared on that academy?
I love
So I would say a really good place to start is the community groups. So the admins, the devs, there's architects, there's marketers, there's loads of community groups out there. Normally they're looking for speakers, they're looking for interesting content for their members, and that's a really good place to get started because they're a very welcoming audience. Everybody's just giving up of their time to be involved. They all want to learn. They're all keen to know more and to understand. So it's it can often be a really good match of speaker and an audience. And also most of these groups will be, the people who run them will be experienced speakers, and they'll be more than happy to help shaping the content of the talk, tips on delivery, etc. So that's kind of I would say that's the most straightforward way. I mean, you can pitch straight at Dreamforce and things like that, and people sometimes do that, and then they get a little bit nervous when they get in there because they feel it's a bit of a step up. There's the other community conferences. There's the London's Calling. All of those conferences, again, are normally looking for speakers, and they're very keen on people who haven't spoken before. They're very keen to move people up. So that's always worth doing as well. The biggest thing I would say to people, though, is just believe in themselves, really. I mean, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but normally what's stopping people from starting the public speaking journey is themselves. They're just so worried about what might happen, they can't get over that and actually put themselves out there. And once they do, they'll find it's a completely different experience to the one they were worried about, and they'll love it and they'll want to do more.
So it's finding your niche, isn't it? Finding something so you don't feel like an imposter, like, oh, I talk about something and what if I'm doing it wrong? It's finding something that you feel like you own and and even if it's a story. So one of our Supermum alumni is a guy in Spain, and he's just sharing a user group his story of his work experience project. And I'm like, that's amazing. I'm so glad he put himself forward because it's his experience, it's his journey, so nobody else can own that or do
Exactly.
anything else. but also he's doing that to get profile to land a job. And I'm like, hats off to him,
Yeah, absolutely.
brilliant. So, somebody who's even not got a job yet, anybody can do this. And we had another lady, one of our other Supermums alumni, who had got a job and she got it over 70 applications, but her
Wow.
background was in childcare. And she's working for a company in Manchester, and she spoke at the Manchester user group again about her
nice.
journey of relaunching and retraining and getting that job. And so I think, hopefully that, those individuals with hardly any experience in the industry are getting up and presenting and sharing to inspire others. So it's never, you don't have to wait to a certain point. I think
No, absolutely.
it's great to
And
just build that confidence, because when you're a Salesforce professional, you have to be able to speak in public
yeah,
to people. In any capacity, it's a great skill to learn, isn't it?
absolutely. You have to be able, normally every job will involve speaking to a group of people in a conference room, even if that's just talking to them about the start of a new piece of work or the start of some training. So being able to handle those kind of introductions is very important. The other couple of pieces of advice I used to give to people, one, the imposter syndrome is the classic one. People in the audience might know more than me. So what? They're sat down. They're not brave enough to get up on stage. So who cares what they think? And the other thing that people often get is, oh, someone's talked about this before. I don't know enough. There are other experts. I always just say, it wasn't like there was one talk that was given on this topic to everybody in the world and it covered absolutely everything and we were all there, so we all know it now. Just because someone did a talk on this 2 years ago and everybody who was there thought it was really great, there's a whole load of people who weren't around at that point in time who would like to hear about that topic again. So it's again, these are all kind of mechanisms that people use to talk themselves out of it. I won't do it just yet. I'm not quite ready.
Yeah.
And it never feels like the right time. The first time I did it, which just remember is awful. I was going to be, people were going to throw fruit at me. It's going to be rushed off stage. Everyone was going to be booing me. And obviously none of that happened at all. It was a lovely, appreciative audience. Yeah, it's just, but I was convinced it was going to go terribly wrong.
Actually say that because Heather is the one that's pushed me into all of this, because I remember when I did the interview initially and she said, can you put together a little short sentence? And I spent all day, because I kept saying, this is Lynn. No, this is it. And I just kept doing it all day. And then, but it's Heather that's pushed me into doing podcasts, into doing, these Wednesday live at 5 that I do now. I've done my first speaker slot and I've got another one coming up soon. So all of this has been all down to you, Heather. So thank you.
Oh, encouragement. I haven't pushed you because you haven't wanted it.
No, I know. I've always been in front of camera, haven't I?
And look at you now, Lynn, full of brimming with confidence, not even giving it a second thought.
maybe
building up.
one.
Oh,
There's
it's building up.
ChatGPT now, though. Imagine how easy that would be. Though it's just like, just give me 500 words on this is Lynn.
Yeah.
Boom, done.
Oh my goodness.
She loves
How many
to.
have you got?
I think her favourite thing was being the awards compare at our Supermums Awards, and she had
Oh, lovely.
her golden shoes and her golden envelopes.
I love that. Do you know what? It's funny because just saying on that, we sat on a panel first, which I was really nervous about. And then afterwards, I was absolutely in my element. I got to say, and the winner is, which was
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah, get a load of awesome people coming up on stage. Brilliant.
It's just building confidence. And I think we've had amazing lady Natalie Forkin, who's been a public speaker coach. She's on one of our podcast shows. So for those
right.
listening, you can listen back to that podcast with her. But, I did public speaking training. Obviously, Keir, you ran an academy. We've got Natalie Forkin, who offers public speaking coaching as well. And Lynn's benefited from that. And I think the main thing is, don't feel like you should just know how to do it. Right.
Mm.
The thing is go and learn how to do it, go and get some tips and advice, because we all feel nervous about something we don't know what to do. And we shouldn't assume that we should naturally know how to be good at it. It's like assuming we should be good at anything without learning or knowing. So I think really appreciate you doing that academy here. I think, I'm encouraging one of us other supermums that wants to do more of this. I was saying, oh, go and check out what Keir did, because nobody's doing that at the moment. And I think
No, indeed.
we want to kind of keep encouraging more people to speak. We want to encourage people to be able to share it, but giving them the teaching and the training, gives them that step up to do it. And again, the opportunity as well. So we had a demo jam today for our supermums internally. And so one of the supermums did a demo of Service Cloud for the first time amongst the supermums. And it was like, she's really nervous, but it's just having those opportunities. Once you've done it once, then you do it in front of a client or an interview, then you do it in a workshop, and then you can go and do it to a user group. It's just all these little increments that build up to then, being at Dreamforce. And you're right, at Dreamforce, they do ask what events you've
Yeah.
spoken at before. So they are looking for people who are confident as well as newbies. So I think you're right in terms of just building up gradually. But
It's very heavily managed at Dreamforce as well, isn't it? It's quite a
yeah.
process in itself if you're selected as to speak at Dreamforce.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for everything that you've done, Keir, over the last few years. I'm glad you're in the weeds learning all these new tools with everybody else. You were definitely a few steps before us, and we're following in your footsteps, wading through the mud, going, okay, what's this now? Headless 360. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I like to keep us on our toes, but really appreciate you being here today and sharing your story. And again, thank you for everything you've done, and thank you, Lynn.
Thank you,
Thanks very
Keir.
much.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks for
We-
having me. Been
Oh,
great.
you're welcome. We'll see you all on the next podcast show very shortly. Thank you.